from Sport England to UK Active, who are the trade body for the fitness industry, themselves are not-for-profit. They then assembled a spogo team, I'd like to think of specialists, and already part of that consortium was Hallmont, who are probably best known for digitising the Addison Lee, what was a telephone system, into a very modern internet-led courier system. We also had McCann World Group online, who were at the time the marketing service provider on London 2012. We also already had Talk2, who are an award-winning company in CRM. They're used to dealing with mass consumer databases, handling multiple financial transactions. We added quite soon after that IO Active, who do security penetration, and they do it for Google, they do it for eBay, so they're pretty well known. And we've just recently signed a contract with Spectrum to do the customer services. They handle Love Film for Amazon, and we all know how good Amazon's service is. This project came about as the catalyst was the Olympics. It would probably have happened anyway. It is only possible because you've got Sport England, who bring the sports industry together with UK Active and the fitness industry. So effectively, you're bringing together the sport and the fitness and leisure industry to make this happen. Slide here. So that's it. Sorry, I mean, I was just I've got to duplicate slide. So bringing those two together is the only way it makes it work, and it wouldn't have happened otherwise. And the reason it can happen is because UK Actives on their main board, they have the software providers that can cover 80% of the country, and the operators as well. You know, with 3 computer systems, 3 booking systems, you can cover most of the country. So practically, this would not have happened if we didn't have these partners involved. Our first task, in fact our key task for the project generally, as Charles was saying, it's to make it as easy to find and book a physical activity or sport as it is to find and book a train ticket. This is extremely simple to grasp and very easy to explain to someone, but it's very complex to do. And the reason it's complex is because you're dealing with real people with real commercial priorities. We're collecting and validating data from a lot of different sources. These people, who may even be competing with each other on a regular basis, these people are prioritizing their own commercial requirements. If it's the Olympic year, with the NGBs, they're prioritizing the Olympics. On top of that, they had the whole sport plans to do, which is their funding from Sport England. So it was a very, very busy year. And they all have a lot of other things on their mind. So when we look at the progress of how we've got on this year, you have to bear in mind that there were a lot of other things on their mind and detract from them. The first task we had to do was to... Oh, sorry, I've got a timeline thing. After having assembled the team, the first thing we had to do was get a brand together. Sorry, I haven't seen these before. Yeah, the point about this slide, I put NGB data received. This is slightly misleading, and it again goes back to the point about whether NGBs were fully engaged with us. Rowing have an API already. They're a very digitally advanced NGB. They were able to give us our data two months into the project. We got the next set of data from the NGBs in May, and we didn't get another set of data until after the Olympics. So we prioritised the Olympics, and the reason we prioritised the Olympics is because obviously it was a great catalyst, and if you're an NGB and you want to promote your sport, having your sport and an Olympics in your own country is the best opportunity you're ever going to get. So we prioritised it, but in retrospect, it maybe was a bit of a mistake because we ended up with not a lot of NGB data on the site live by the time we went to the Olympics. However, it did mean that we had a site ready to go live. So we went live to the stakeholders. So all the clubs and the database and the facilities that came from the Active Places database, we went live to them before the Olympics. And when the Olympics came on, when they started, we were able to go to them and help them get them started on validating the data. So up until the Olympics, we got the data on the site, we started validating it, and that was very important. When we went live, we had basically a search facility. That was it. We didn't risk going with integrated booking at the same time, just a search facility. And we started our social media. So we started with our Facebook and our Twitter because there was lots of interaction we could do around the Olympic Games themselves. After the Olympics, we had a twin focus. We had to continue validating the data. And actually, that data wasn't just the data that was there already. We were aggregating more data. Throughout this project, what has been very interesting is how many different organisations have come to us off their own bat to say, we'd love to be involved in this. How do we get involved? And we've got them involved if it's been a simple API, if it's been easy to integrate with them, and if they're a good quality product and offer something for a consumer, then we've got involved with them. So that's been quite important throughout the project, the amount of extra data we've been gathering on the site. The other thing we were looking at then, and the focus was obviously in integrating booking. I remember saying to the exec board on October the 1st, we are ready to go live with integrated booking. It took another 7 weeks before we actually went live. We had a problem with the financial process. We had a problem with someone going on holiday. We had someone going ill. And of course, you're always dealing with the operator site itself, and you're dealing with the software provider. And their resource may go up and down. So we have to be real about this. I mean, we got there in the end, which was great, and we expect things to go much more simple as a result. But the first booking system and the first booking integration took a very long time. And you'll see up there, 80 sites offering booking live. I'm not going to tempt fate, but we've got 5 more sites going live today. And I say today, are they live now? And if those 5 work well for the next week, then we'll have 80 sites live at once. And that is the advantage of working with one software provider on a particular system. We also know, though, that there will be tweaks to individual sites. So some of the big gyms will have tweaks to their own individual site, and we'll have to accommodate those. Anyway. We cross our fingers on that one. The consumer launch is obviously very important. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we're hoping to go at the end of this month. The first thing we did was create a brand. We wanted a blank sheet of paper. We wanted to create something that was vaguely digital. There were a couple of considerations. The first one, which was actually that women, not all women, but women in particular, are a bit averse to the word sport. So we couldn't have a brand that simply said sport in the title. So spogo is roughly sport and go. But if you just put sport in there, you'd have created a big negative effect. People who go to Zumba, Pilates, don't necessarily think they're doing sport. And people, generally, it affects men as well. But we had to be very careful of that one. So as a requirement, it was let's come up with something simple that possibly could be used like as a verb. You know, Google and Twitter, these sort of things, they're good digital brands. We want it to be memorable, and we have a young target audience to appeal to. So spogo came up, was researched. It did well enough. It was a good name, and we've learned to love it. When we put the branding colours, when we put London 2012 colours onto it, it gets a huge response. So we've had very positive research on the look and feel of spogo, and we're already talking in the team now. We've lived with it for a long time. We talk about spogoing, and so we're a great believer that this is a strong brand going forward. And I think I hand over to Colin to talk about the implementation.
The mic doesn't work, or? Okay. I think Charles has given you a good indication of the fact that the size of the market potentially is quite huge. We've touched on the fact that in the publicly owned leisure stock, so that's owned by a local authority, it might be operated by a charitable trust or a private company, you effectively have 3 large software providers that pretty much everyone uses. It doesn't matter who you are, you use one of those. and as a smaller fourth provider, which gives us pretty much 100% coverage across the country. So by working with those three providers, you can have access to a large proportion of publicly owned leisure stock, which is very much the backbone or the spine of the kind of fitness industry, particularly around pay and play. We already touched on the role of UK Active, or as it was known previously, the Fitness Industry Association, which is very much the trade body for the leisure industry. Its members represent 3,500 of those private and public leisure operators. So again, a lot of relationships came from UK Active out into relationships with the sector. So being able to pick up the phone to LA Fitness, Fitness First, GLL, Serco, Leisure Connections. They're mainly nothing to you, but they operate over 700 sites between them. So one of the big challenges with working within this environment is also reassuring the leisure providers that we're not just going to steal their or poach their existing customers. There's not an awful lot of point in effectively someone who's regularly going to a facility managed by someone like GLL in London, and now they go to Spogo to go to the same facility managed by GLL. It's not really going to help get more people participating in sport. So it was about, again, showing them how utilising the software systems that they use to run their businesses and driving more people through those software systems into their businesses with no real staff time to them was going to benefit them. But obviously, there is a lot of risk aversion within the current environment. A lot of them are struggling to manage their budgets with spiralling costs, particularly around energy. So in the first year, effectively, we issued agreements based on effectively zero fee. So we would take someone, try and attract someone into doing sport and physical activity. Let's say Ash wanted to book a squash court near here. He would go onto Spogo. He would look at facilities in the nearby area. He would pick one of them. He would see that it had online booking integrated because we'd integrated with a software system. He'd click on there. He would book through into that squash court. We would do an API call and chat through that, and Ash will go through that later. And potentially we would take the payment, but we would not actually charge the operator for that service in the first year. So effectively they're getting a new participant utilising their squash court that they hadn't seen before, and they've not had to pay for it. So that's a good deal. In the second year and in future revenue models, looking at some sort of commission basis, so a percentage of product price. And now, Ash.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so Spogo from a technical point of view. Basically, what Spogo isn't trying to be is to go away and write a whole new set of systems for the industry. Basically, there's an awful lot of great products already out there that have been used for a lot of the parties that we're trying to work with. Quite a few of the people that run those products are in this room today. That covers a whole range of areas for the things that we're trying to achieve with Spogo. So I've broken it. Nick, we have a technical issue on the slide. Oh, there you go. There you go. Okay, so the first part of that, as Colin mentioned, we're working with the 3 or 4 biggest software providers in terms of allowing the big venue booking systems in the country. So there we've got Legend, Gladstone, XN, and Clarity, which, as Colin mentioned, we've got about 90% coverage there. So this basically involves us integrating into Spogo, identifying if somebody does a search for a site, we say, right, who is this site? Let's say it's, I don't know, it's Virgin Ealing, for example, and they use a Legend system. From that point on, we'd know we have to integrate with the Legend APIs through the rest of the progress, which would basically check availability, check somebody's a member, book a slot, take the payment, and then we send the confirmation email down. So basically, in terms of booking, you'll go through the entire flow, which will be seamless to anybody using the site, but it could be interacting with a number of different providers along the journey. That has proven to be by far the most difficult part of the project. This is really the first time a lot of these systems have integrated with an external party. So although their APIs were available, there's been a lot of tweaking, a lot of testing to actually get it to the point where it works in a real-life external environment. In terms of data, again, we'll come on to this a bit more in a moment, but again, Spogo is an aggregator. We're not there to create this source data. It is all out there in many disparate forms, and it's our job to take that in, cleanse it, and make it consumer-facing in a trustworthy way so that we know that anything that is on Spogo is up to date and is accurate. In terms of other entities for booking, we've got some great partners there, such as Booking Bug. I know Glenn is in the room today, where basically if you're not one of these huge venues, you're either a small club or you're a coach or you're a personal trainer, we're promoting services from partners that we integrate with to these people because it basically allows them to manage their systems better. And also we're taking feeds from these different parties so that anybody that registers will basically become a searchable entity on Spogo, so it's an extra marketing route for these people. With both of these people as well, as you go through the journey, you find, let's say, Pete Smith is a personal coach in North London, you stumble across him, you say, right, I found Pete, you can actually make a booking for Pete through Spogo with the iframe that we provided through these various different solutions. So again, it's all completely seamless, everything is within Spogo, but we're externally going out to a number of systems here. Again, widgets, from a consumer point of view, we didn't have the time, the money, or, to be honest, the skills to go away and create bespoke widgets that we knew people were going to find interesting from a consumer point of view to enhance the experience. So again, there'll be more of these a little bit later on, but some examples there are cycle streets where a nice feature where you can plan cycle routes, Parasport, again, we'll see in a moment, but it's basically a disability wizard. And Taster Lab, who as we do a search, it allows us to prompt relevant taster sessions that are near you as you go through that journey. So all there to try and incentivize people doing a bit more activity, but using those external partners to do that. In terms of CRM, I mean, as Charles was saying, Insight is such a huge part of this project. It's a project in its own right. So again, we use Talk2 for this, who are very professional in this area. So as we gain more insight through these various sources and through booking, we have a bespoke CRM program, which will cross-sell, promote, incentivize, revisit back to the site, all through the single customer view that we create through the Talk2 partner in this area. So just to go into data in a little bit more detail, Active Places is obviously our core data set, which, as Nick mentioned, there's about 90,000 facilities available in there. So that, in terms of a Spogo search, that is really our big core set of data, the starting point of where we go from, but we're constantly trying to build on top of that. So we have the NGB data. Now, this can be in the form of both pure clubs, but also events. So we work with people such as Robin on Eventility, where there'll be clubs using their software, putting events into the system, and we'll take feeds of that information. But also we'll get NGBs sending us just huge spreadsheets of these are our events for next year, and we'll plug those in and make all of those searchable within Spogo as well. In addition, as we mentioned, we've got the other booking partners such as Clock Sushi and Booking Bug, where people will be registering on their systems. We'll be taking that data into Spogo as well to add to the whole search mechanism. And there's a whole host of other data sources that Colin will be covering off shortly. So that is really the core searchable data set. In terms of extra data that we're going to get as part of the project, we have a number of bespoke surveys, and we'll continue to have new surveys to get feedback on the site, to get feedback on clubs, a whole host of things. It'll all be feeding into the central database. And also, obviously, we'll have, as we integrate with all of the booking systems, we get data coming back around timetables, activities available at the site, actual bookings being made. So it's an integration, as well as giving us great insight, also gives us real-time data to give us a real accurate picture of what is going on at a venue at any point in time. I'm just going to hand over to Colin again, just to go over some bit more NGBs in a bit more detail.
As we mentioned earlier, there are 46 national governing bodies funded by Sport England. There's actually an awful lot more than that, but 46 is enough complexity for now, so we'll stay with that. These are national governing bodies that we currently have live on the site. So most of them got, interestingly, blue blue and red logos, but effectively it shows the range of different organisations involved, from British Rowing to Rugby Football League, England Basketball, England Hockey, tennis, triathlon, etc. And we add more national governing bodies each week. So, for example, this week we've had very positive pledges coming in from netball, athletics and canoeing. So, you know, they'll all have individual timelines when they add in their data. Some of us are providing us with pure club data, some event data, and sometimes activity data. And activity data is where you've got a particular date, time, and session. Because it might be very interesting to know where your nearest rugby league club is to you, but actually what you really need to know is where your nearest rugby league club is, and are they running a beginner session, if you are a beginner, that you might want to access, what date, what time, and potentially how much that would cost you. And what age group it would be focused on. We also aggregated a large number of other data sources because with Spogo, obviously there's a very sport focus to this, but this is about physical activity, this is about getting people moving, and it'd be great if they do sport, but equally we know people just want to move. So this shows a range of other data sources that we've got on the site. So in no particular order, you've got something like the Great Outdoor Gym Company that provides physical fitness equipment in parks, which is very popular at the moment. You can't go into London Park without seeing them. You've got Dot Community, which is a huge source of disability data. Over 3,500 records of people with disabilities providing data themselves on what activities that they do. REPS is personal trainer information. Water Baby is about getting very small children involved in water and swimming pools. So a range of different data sources added over time to represent the ranges of physical activity that people undertake across the country.
Okay, so staying with data, as we mentioned earlier, one of the new government policies is to make data that is in the public eye more open and accessible for the industry to use as a whole, again, to try and encourage inventions and new apps to try and get people doing more sport. So this is the Spogo developer page, where basically this is the first time that the active places data set is published in full. In addition to have the actual data files available, there's also the data dictionary and data standards documents there for active places. And in addition, we've got our own Spogo data on there as well that can be used for any purpose around activity tagging, keywords and categories, and then the supporting documents that go along with that. So it's quite obviously this is an area that's going to build over time. We'll have an awful lot of things on here and APIs in the future and that kind of stuff to make it a bit slicker. But as a starting point, the data is there and it is open and ready to use. In fact, the first time this data was used was an event called Hack for Health, which is an ODI organised event. The active places data set through Spogo was part of that thing, and the actual entrant that won the competition, which was called, it slips my mind, Go Hit It Off. Go Hit It Off, which is basically a go and find a racket sports partner in your area just to help people find a buddy on that side of things. So that actually won the competition. So we're now working with that particular group of developers to try and get that activity up and running and live. So that's the first real use of the data set. And there's just a quote there as well from Tim Berners-Lee. Obviously, we've been very lucky. We've had some great advocates on the project, such as Francis Maud, Tim Berners-Lee, you can see there, that have mentioned us in various statements as they've gone through as a good example of how we're starting to use this data to help the industry. Very quickly, I'm just going to go through this. I'm sure most of you have seen the majority of the site, but just to run through a couple of the key features that are currently there. So using all of those different data sets, obviously our main strength at the moment is being the biggest aggregator of data in this country in terms of finding sport. So the search mechanism is our strongest point at the moment. So that will basically allow you to find an activity or a venue in your area, break it down into flagging it by venue, by club, by trainers, by outdoors, or by events. So you can go through and actually strip down, hopefully find very easily what it is that you're looking for. The last piece of that, and again, as we said, the booking side of things has been by far the most difficult part of the project so far, but we have done it, and this is Bolton Arena that is up there. It was our first site to go live, So you can see that you can go and select any of the activities with a pink arrow are basically bookable. So you go through the process there. As soon as you click on that pink arrow, you're basically using then APIs that are linking directly live to the venue site itself. If you go and check this, it'll be down because there's actually a problem. There's actually a problem at the moment which is being fixed, but it's temporary. And as Richard said, there'll be by next week 80 of these sites where you'll see the pink arrows that indicate that it is there and ready to book. So, you know, we're quite pleased and proud we got to that point, but yeah, painful times. Another area we put quite a lot of effort in to begin with was the sports directory. Which looks, I mean, it's quite simple in its way, but this was basically working with NGBs directly, doing an awful lot of research to try and come up with as many sports as possible to try and give the public an indication of, you know, what is this sport, you know, who is it for you, how much is it likely to cost? Again, just to try and give people that bit of motivation to take part in an activity. And these kind of things are things through the CRM journey when we go more down a consumer launch view. We'll be identifying the kind of person that is receiving an email, for example, and then pointing them to relevant areas of this part of the site, trying to get them incentivized. So this is an example of the widget. So this is the Cycle Streets widget. We're on the home page. You can search where you want to go from and to. And then there's various different breakdowns of maps, depending on if you want to go down the fastest route, the quietest route, or the safest route. So again, that is using an existing tool, and we've just had a white label version of it done, but it's quite a nice piece. Again, another widget here. So this is using Parasport. This is the Disability Sports Wizard. So it's basically self-assessment. You go through, and based on your disability answers, it will recommend a series of sports that might be suitable for you. This will currently hand off to the Parasport website to give you more information. That's a very rich source of disability sport information. One of the other areas we've worked on that we've delivered in the last couple of months is the spogo widget. So basically we're trying to work with various stakeholders and partners, and indeed anybody else who wants to take it. You can come onto the site, go to the spogo widget area, choose which format of widget you like, configure what activities you want to be available in the drop-down, and then it generates you a couple of lines of embed code to put on your site. So we've had quite a few takers with that at the moment, which is great for us, obviously, because it's going to drive more traffic. So we've got people like Asda working on that. We're in talks with the NHS. So it's a nice, easy piece. It looks nice, and people seem interested, and it seems to be working well. And then handing over to Richard.
Yeah, as Charles referenced earlier on, the insight we'll get from this project, it should be enormous. At the moment, there is an awful lot of money spent on finding out what people do in terms of sport, how much activity they do, where they do it. Most of the time, it's what they say they do. The beauty of what spogo will have, knowing that people lie or are very optimistic, we'll be able to say exactly what they searched for, when they searched for it, where they searched for it. And when we've got booking, we'll be able to see where they booked and what they actually paid for. And of course, that then enables us to anticipate demand. We'll be able to say to a gym or a leisure centre, did you know that actually a lot of people couldn't get a booking on your site, but they wanted to on this particular day, in this particular sport or activity, and we'll be able to go back to them with that information. So that's very exciting from a consumer point of view. The other thing we did that we didn't originally intend to do, which was invest in a CRM platform for stakeholders, the B2B section. And as a way of validating data, there is nothing better than getting people to feel ownership of their own data. So we've built a platform, and we are engaging with the clubs now of the NGBs. And it's been very exciting. The first email we did in November to over 13,000 clubs got a delivery rate of over 11,000. So they are at least, we're getting the email addresses correct, we're finding the right people, and we see this as being a very positive way of validating data going forward. And I would also say that we are investigating, again, Nick and Charles, I think both mentioned it earlier, how do we get data on this, about sports and activities. And we've been talking to some very good companies about what can they scrape from the internet using lots of different sources. What can they scrape that is accurate? An example is boxing, where they have a database. The NGB has a database of about 700 boxing clubs. We've got a company that came back to us and said they've found 3,000. We're in the process of looking at what those 3,000 are. And frankly, there's an awful lot of quality control needed and checks and things as to whether they're realistic and real companies or some sort of steroid abuse company above a gym or above a pub or something. That's a sort of area where we need to be very careful. But it is very interesting to see what the digital world can do to improve this area. So this is a sort of summary of what we've learnt. And I think the sector is very much behind the project. I think probably this year it's been a fantastic year. The results that Sport England have mentioned, there's 15 million people who do activity once a week. As Charles has already said, that gives enormous scope, not only to get those people doing more, but also to reach people who aren't doing any at all at the moment. We think spogo can really help that. We should be realistic about other priorities on people, but actually now that the Olympics is over and people have done their whole sport plans, we think that the difference will be the consumer launch. When we go live to the consumer, I think we'll see big numbers on this, and I think everyone will just sign up for us and want to be on the site. We have had fantastic support. We didn't actually have a consumer launch, as we've said, but we did talk to a number of different brands at various times throughout the year. And all these brands have helped us for no money at all, because either they like the database, or more that they actually like what we're trying to do. The digital community in particular seem to be very keen on being fit and healthy. And maybe they're a slightly younger community or whatever, but actually they've engaged with us and they've been very, very helpful. IO Active, I put there, actually gave us their security penetration testing for value in kind, which is worth an awful lot of money. The other thing is we've had great support from the consumers. I mean, we spend all this time in the murky depths of technical integration, but actually the consumers love this project. They think, well, for some people, it's, well, does it not already exist? But anyone who's actually tried to search on Google for sport and physical activity will know how confusing it has been. So what's to come? The consumer launch, it's been quite tricky to work out when we can launch to the consumer. We did some research back in November when we knew we were pretty confident we were already the best and biggest database in the country. But we went to 10,000 people. We went through the ASDA Active Survey and the Gold Challenge Survey, people who'd done sport and activity or were interested in that area. And we tested ourselves and did very well against ease of use, speed of finding something, and also the look and feel of the site. The area where we were a little bit weak was, what if you didn't know what you wanted to do? You didn't know how to start. And it was that sort of sticky content that we needed to engage with. So for the consumer launch, we're going to have a news section. We're going to have a clinic where simple advice is, warm up in the winter and what you might wear and how to avoid injury, sort of thing you'd expect to get. We're also looking at other areas. Evidence says that actually if you've got someone to do sport with, you're much more likely to do it. So we're going to have a Find a Buddy section of the site. One of the areas we're very excited about, because it is about consumer engagement, is we're going to have programs that you can download and tailor to yourself. 6-month programs to change behaviour, to get yourself fit and healthy and back into sport, and lots of other sports to try. And we're doing that with guinea pigs. We've got some volunteers, people like you, who have agreed to undertake these programs and take us through all the pain and the excitement of doing them and share it with us on social media. And it's interesting having working with Weber on the launch plan on this, the consumer launch plan, how many of the media are very interested in this area. We've got some journalists already very keen to undertake this journey back to sport, which is very exciting. So that's where we are to date. The reason we're planning to launch end of this month is it's roughly 6 months after London 2012. We're not going to make a big claim about the Olympic legacy. We'll let others do that for us. But we are confident the demand is there and that people are close enough to their New Year's resolutions to know that they need every help they can get. these are our KPIs. We don't know whether 20,000 unique users is great or not. If anyone out here it's pretty much since we went live, we're putting on 12 or 1,300 people a week. We think that's great. We haven't told anyone about it yet, so it looks good. It feels good to us. We've got 1,400 on the website. That's quite interesting. We've got 14. We're nearly at 1,500 now. We did an email just before Christmas to those 1,400 people who are registered on the site, and we got an open rate of 44%, which sounds pretty good to me. Otherwise, booking integration, hopefully next week we'll have a much bigger figure up there. Otherwise, yeah, we're pretty keen to see the consumer launch, frankly, because if we get a good consumer launch, we think we'll smash those figures. I think that's our bit.
Yeah, me next. Let's rest. Okay, so you can sit down. You can have a rest. So I'm just going to briefly talk you through the operator point of view, and then obviously bring up Alex from England Hockey to talk about national governing bodies. So I think we've kind of broadly talked through the role of a leisure provider, leisure operator at this stage. There are over 5,900 across the country. Roughly just over 3 and a bit in the private sector, about nearly 2 3/4 in the public sector, but a range of different size and weights within that, as Nick described. Obviously, every individual operator, every individual business has its own strategy, but to summarise them simply would be to say more people, more active, more often is not a bad way of summarising their individual focus. We've integrated with them on a technology-led approach, very simple like that. If you are a leisure provider and you are using, say, the Legend system, which is one of the big software systems we're integrating with, it is a versionless system. So if you're on Legend, we can integrate with you, full stop. If you're utilizing the Gladstone system or the XN system, then you need to be on the latest version of those systems before we can integrate with you. So it doesn't mean that we're not talking to leisure providers, say Durham County Council, who are on an older version of XN, but it's more about a warming up conversation and a conversation about where spogo is going, whereas obviously someone like Glasgow Life, who are on, well, no, Carrick Leisure, Cornwall, basically operate most of the facilities in Cornwall, are on the latest version of Gladstone. So it's an integration conversation rather than a concept conversation. So that's the kind of key role of leisure providers. They all have different challenges. We alluded to some of the national challenges earlier, but in the private sector, there's an overall potential declining leisure spend, and particularly in recession, you get people trading down. So they can't afford their David Lloyd direct debit, so they drop down to maybe a local authority direct debit. You've seen the rise of budget clubs. So if you go on any London street, you'll see, direct debits of, £19.99 or even £9.99 introductory fees within the private sector. A lot of these are venture capitalist owned, so there's an issue in a recession with declining credit, the ability to finance the operations, and Fitness First recently has been a major casualty of that. And you've also got an interesting concept around the image of a gym, and you've seen in the last 5 years a dramatic growth in outdoor fitness, brands now like British Military Fitness. You can't walk through a London or South East Park without running into a boot camp, but that's a growing trend. So again, there's the operators needing to respond to consumer appetite, consumer experience. And obviously, particularly in the private sector, one of the key challenges is around benchmarking yourselves against others and making sure that you are driving maximum value for your customers. In the local authority structure, we have some serious cuts on the table, and they're only just really starting to bite with a lot of local authorities. You have a tension on delivering what we'd call be in the sector a 0% subsidy versus social outcomes. So a number of local authorities subsidise their leisure facilities, whether they operate them in-house or whether they actually contract that out to a third party. Those subsidies are no longer available. There is no money in the coffers to pay that. But a local authority isn't just a pure, well, it's not a commercial animal. It needs to drive social outcomes. It needs to focus on people with disabilities. It needs to focus on people from BME groups, ethnic minorities. It needs to make sure that it's driving people on low incomes to be fit and healthy at this critical time. So there's a balance and there's a tension between not subsidising the service and ultimately achieving social outcomes. We have the change from health structure, so public health is now moving from a primary care trust basis to a local authority basis. We still have the consumer image of gym, and we still have benchmarking as key factors. So slightly different blends of challenges, whether it's private sector or public sector, but all very much focused on attracting consumers into their facilities. So how would spogo help your average leisure operator if such thing existed? Well, obviously, everyone is hungry for data. They're hungry for insight. They want to know what those consumer trends are so they can anticipate them within their businesses and so they can provide for them. An individual operator, even one of the large operators operating over 100, 150 sites, struggles to be involved in national campaigns simply because they don't operate everywhere. Whereas obviously if we're integrating through the software systems that they utilize, we have the ability to be able to create an umbrella around some sort of national campaign. Whether that was Change for Life, whether that was Abbey Well, whether that was Kellogg's, doesn't really matter. You can do it at scale utilizing the services that they operate, rather than having to get every single operator to come on board with the services that you operate. Obviously, spogo is focused on giving them a target to a wider audience rather than their existing consumers. And we can support new relationships with national governing bodies. You're seeing a blurring between a national governing body of sport and what a leisure provider wants to do. So one of the growth sports in the last couple of years has been triathlon. So lots more people have started doing triathlon. They aren't necessarily members of triathlon clubs. But going forward, you could see leisure providers working with England Triathlon to provide triathlon-orientated sessions in the local leisure centre or local park with club support. So you're kind of not quite seeing NGB sport, formal sport here, national and leisure provider, informal sport here. You're getting a mixture between those two worlds. And obviously, UK Active, spogo has played a very strong role in engaging both parties on that conversation. Okay, Alex. Yeah, that one. But you're on slide one, so okay. You're fine.
Brilliant, thanks. So I'm Alex Teasdale, as mentioned earlier. I'm the National Lead for Clubs and Facilities at England Hockey. I've been working there since 2005. And I came to hockey from a retail background. When I arrived, it was very surprising, having come from a retail background, to see a fair few changes were made within hockey and sport, or some governing bodies, without any consultation to the marketplace. Now, that's partly nice for the person in the governing body, because there's none of the hassle or the grief that goes with marketplace consultation when you want to make a change that is potentially going to be difficult. However, this is obviously not sustainable, and England Hockey were dealt a bit of a slap in the face in the 2009-2010 season, when we lost 18,000 participants who were playing once a week. Those participants either reduced the frequency in which they were playing and went down to maybe once a month, or stopped playing altogether. So that was a real wake-up call for us, I think, to sort of stand up and say, okay, we need to start making some significant changes, and we need to make them quite quickly. So, as has been mentioned earlier, we're one of the Sport England funded sports. We wrote our whole sport plan during 2012. It was a busy year, as was alluded to earlier. And we were really pleased to be awarded in December 12 million. We'd asked for 12 million, so we got what we asked for, and we feel it was against some pretty robust plans, so hopefully Sport England agreed. Some of the research that we began to look at once we had suffered some big losses in our active people number through the market research was looking at exactly what our customers wanted. Before then, we probably never even called them customers. They were players or volunteers in our sport. What we found across many sports is the same, is that people wanted to play less formally. They didn't want the commitment of having to join a club and pay an affiliation fee. It will be similar for gym members who are paying their annual fee and their monthly fee on top. They didn't necessarily want to play at the same time every week, and they wanted the flexibility to not turn up on a Tuesday because they were delayed at work, but to go along on a Thursday, for argument's sake. So over the last couple of years, our development directorate led that piece of work, and we established a new product called Rush Hockey. Rush Hockey is a 5 or 6-a-side game, so it's a small-sided game, our equivalent of 5-a-side football. It can be played on a number of surfaces. Hockey is a sport that is challenged by the fact that it requires a very specific surface and a very expensive surface to play on. So it can be played on a number of surfaces, indoor or outdoor. don't need 11, 12 people for a squad, 2 teams worth. So you can get a group of your mates together, you can go along, book a court or a space down at your local sports centre or a multi-use games area, or a mugger, a small outdoor area, and you can go and play hockey with your friends. We also looked at that time through the marketplace research at the needs of the women's market in particular. We have a programme called the Back to Hockey programme. Netball run a very, very successful Back to Netball programme also, and we try to follow in their footsteps. The audiences actually were very similar, the markets were very similar between that hockey and netball lady of a certain age who wanted to get back into sport, back into hockey, back into netball after a break. So that might be that they played at university, stopped when they left university because they couldn't find an opportunity to play in their area, or they played at school and haven't played since school. So on top of our traditional club market, we then launched the Back to Hockey and the Rush Hockey probably late 2011, sort of really coming into its own in early 2012. We've got 920 formal clubs in the country, just over 100,000 participants. I think what was interesting for us was the fact that some of the clubs started to host some of the informal sport. When Rush Hockey was launched, it was intended that we would go to commercial providers, leisure centres, etc., and we would ask them to host Rush Hockey and Back to Hockey for us. The clubs saw it as a real opportunity. All of a sudden, they didn't want their potential market being touched by somebody else. So quite a few of them are now running this informal activity on top of the formal activity that they offer. So we've got a real mix now in the marketplace between clubs and other providers, which we think is really healthy. It also creates a great opportunity for the end user, for the consumer, to make that choice as to the type of environment that they want to play in. Just drag this over a little bit. The basis of our whole sport plan was around something that we call the virtuous circle. So we have moved, I think, fairly successfully over the last 4 years into what we would like to think is a very consultative but a fairly commercially minded organisation. The virtuous circle for us starts with achieving international success and therefore achieving increased visibility. So 2012 was key for us, as with any other sport, in being able to do that. We didn't want to miss an opportunity. I think in 1988, which I do just about remember, the men's hockey team won a gold medal at the Seoul Olympics. I was told that a number of people, thousands of people, turned up at clubs specifically around London. So we have a very large club in Surbiton. There is Reading as well, after the games. And within weeks, it was one man and his dog again. So I think our organisation was still suffering from remembering how that felt. So we were very keen not to let that sort of opportunity go again. Both of our teams were looking to medal, looking to podium in 2012. And so we worked very hard in the development unit to make sure that this visibility, increased visibility and international success could be harnessed all the way through the sport. That obviously then linked into increasing participation. So the second part of our virtuous circle is to attract people of all ages, from all backgrounds, all genders, and give them the same opportunity to play. That then would link through into increasing income generation, whether that's grant funding, trying to attract commercial sponsors, etc. The increase in participation leads through to more people into our talent pathway, which hopefully then eventually will lead back through to international success in the future, the increased visibility, and so the cycle carries on for us. So the live example of that for us last year was we ran a programme called 5 Week Frenzy. It ran from the 27th of July through to the 2nd of September, and it was 5 weeks of giving anybody and everybody an opportunity to pick up a stick and play hockey. We created 25,000 slots, or 25,000 opportunities for people to play in that time. And what we really needed to do was to be able to get those opportunities out to the general public. We had, similar to rowing, we had our own platform. So we have a platform where people can go on and find the hockey opportunities. But as you would imagine, the people who tend to visit that are the people who are already involved in hockey, because they are the people on our website. They're the people who would utilise that, you know, maybe changing areas geographically. So we really did need a platform to help us to get this out to the wider public and out to where some of the latent demand sat. I think somebody mentioned earlier, I think Charles mentioned earlier, looking initially at people who were already involved in sport and keeping them involved in sport, or bringing them back into sport. And for us, that was very much what this was about looking at people who wanted to go and play some form of sport, and we needed some form of platform for them to find our sport. It was our job as a governing body to ensure that ours was obviously the most exciting sport that was going to be seen on that portal. So 23,000 people played last year out of the 25,000 slots that we put together, so we were pretty pleased with that. The knock-on effect now for us, we've just closed our club affiliation. Club affiliation has gone up by 13%. Our active people numbers are still climbing, so we've made it back from the 18,000 deficit. And the rush hockey numbers, we've seen over 10,000 people play rush hockey in the last 12 months. So all in all, we're pretty pleased. We obviously need a bit more time to see if the talent pathway will give us some 2016 athletes and some 2020 athletes. But we hope that this is something sustainable. For us, we couldn't have done it without a platform such as Spogo, however. We were just advertising to our own market otherwise. So from our point of view, it was very important that we could get our data across in a quick and easy manner. It could be uploaded onto the portal, the platform, in a quick and easy manner. People could find it easily. The other link that Colin may talk about later is the link with BBC Things to Do. You can talk about it. You sure? Yeah. Okay. We were very fortunate to be able to give our data in our format to Spogo, and I think that anybody who has sort of dealt in this sort of area before will know that, you know, the data will come in a million different ways. These guys are great. They sort it all out for us. From a governing body, that's a bit of a challenge if you've got to give data in lots of different ways to lots of different people. It was then fed into the BBC Things to Do portal also. So over the summer, that was a massive platform. We all know what a great job the BBC did of televising and some of the digital technology around the Olympics. And so BBC Things to Do received a significant number of hits, and we were pleased to say that we had 600 club and informal playing opportunities loaded into that portal. On top of that, linked into our virtuous circle and the visibility, we also had 40 hockey houses across the country. These were either hockey clubs, pubs or leisure centre cafes who were screening hockey matches during the Olympics, so people could go watch the games, hopefully be inspired, and then go to a facility to play the sport that they'd seen. So for us, the visibility was absolutely massive. That whole programme is called Hockey Nation, so that's something that we saw as being sustainable after the games and continuing. So that was our legacy. So as I said, we don't think that we would have been in a position to be able to get those 23,000 places taken up if it hadn't have been for the opportunity that something such as Spogo gave us feeding into the BBC Things to Do platform. I guess the last thing is, it was mentioned earlier, is the monitoring and evaluation. From a national governing body point of view, I think most of us struggle with the monitoring and evaluation. It's slightly easier from a club perspective, which is formal because we collect club affiliation numbers. We collect it for team numbers. Some of the other governing bodies, such as Judo, run individual membership schemes, but again, that's formal. The informal side of things is very, very hard to measure. So we're really looking forward to, I think, really getting stuck in with whatever happens next with Spogo to help us to understand what the market is actually like. We know who we designed it for, and we know the numbers that we wanted to see through, and now we need to see if that's actually happening. Okay?
That's great. Thank you very much.
Right, I think we've slightly overrun with the time, so I think what we're going to do is we'll move the questions to the end and give everyone a tea break. If we can get back here just after 20 past, and we'll continue and then with the slots. So thanks very much.